So South Africa, the wonderful place. But actually, last time I've seen Antoinette was New York in March. It was the last face-to-face conference I did, and actually the last real travel before the lockdown. So I'm super happy to see her in a virtual space, and I am looking forward for her new talk. So, your turn.
Thank you so much, Susie. Yeah, so that was also the last time I traveled, and you know, and I think we both just made it home with all the doors slamming on our heels. So so today I'd like to talk to you about something that I believe really can change the game for not only the people and the teams that we work with, but also for ourselves. So I'm going to start us off, you know, so we all think that we know what observation is. I'm going to start us off by testing what we think observation is, seeing how well we observe, and you know, and then let's have a little bit of a discussion. So I'm going to play a little video clip. What I'm going to ask you is to take out a piece of paper and a pen, or you know, make a note on your electronic device, and just see if you are looking at this little clip, what do you observe? Okay, and now let's just see that I've got all my technology ready. So here we go, and hopefully you should hear sound. Okay, if you don't hear sound, well, it might give you a different perspective on observation, but let's hope that you hear sound.
Bullies, big bullies. Oh, look who's here. It's the weenies.
Did we not make ourselves clear the other day?
Yes, and that's why we're here.
Yes, we're standing our ground. Apparently. Let's do this already.
Whoa, what do you got there, a weapon?
It's a nice watch. I don't want to break it on your ribs. All right, let's do this. Question. If I don't care about my watch, can I use it as a weapon?
What do you mean?
Well, it's sharp, it's metal. I think I can do some, you know, serious damage with it.
No, you can't use your watch. Or your keys.
Look, here's what we'll do. We'll put all keys and watches in the hatch over there. All right? All right, come on, man. Let's do it.
Before I forget, are we hitting faces?
Of course we're hitting faces. Why wouldn't you hit faces?
Well, because I have to work on Monday. I have a big presentation.
Actually, you know, I got to show this apartment tomorrow, and, you know, this no faces thing might not be a bad idea.
Okay. Nothing from the neck up.
All right.
Or the waist down. Dana's ovulating.
Oh, really? You guys trying again?
Yeah.
So let me just get this straight. So we're strictly talking about the middle.
Come on! Hey, whoa, you want some of this, huh? You want a piece of this, huh? You're standing here, huh?
Hey, those guys are taking our stuff.
Hey!
Get away with that! Hey!
God, that was amazing. That was incredible. You guys kicked butt.
Us? What about you guys? Man, you really gave it to old Mr. Clean back there. He was a big guy.
Yeah, he was, wasn't he?
Yeah, I wouldn't know, having missed everything.
Oh, don't do that to yourself. Any one of us could have tripped over that little girl's jump rope. So, listen, guys, are we okay here?
We're okay.
All right.
Okay, so can I have my hat back? No. Huh.
Hang on one sec. Let me just get control back here. Oh my gosh. There we go. That should do it. There we go. So what you have just witnessed, you know, if you thought that what you saw was that that the guys were intimidated or intimidating one another, that they tried to delay the fight coming up between the two groups, that they actually, neither of them were really wanting to get involved. All of that actually is not observation. It is, it is what we generally do as human beings, coming from where we are, and it is jumping to straight into making some, drawing some conclusions from what we see. So if you were writing down that what you saw was people gesturing quite in big gestures, that people were raising their voices, there was running involved, that's closer to true observation. And it may seem silly when we start out like that, but really the aim of what we're here to talk about today is to think about how we can really help the teams that we lead, or some of you may be coaches, the teams that we coach. To me, all leaders are coaches, and all coaches are leaders. So it's really how to get the most out of what is happening with the person in front of you, or the group that you are with. So the very first problem is, when we look at observation, is the fact that we conflate observation with interpretation or evaluation. So if we look at how we generally, how we trained, and in our problem solving minds, how we deal with situations, we jump from observing into interpreting, into evaluation, and into acting very often as one continuous movement without even noticing the different steps. So, that was all fine and well when we saw a mammoth and we didn't know whether we could eat it or whether it's going to eat us or kill us. But it's not always useful if we look at the world of knowledge work that most of us operate in. Okay, so if we also consider that there are a couple of basic things that we all assume to be true that's not true, we are in a deeper problem than what we could think. So if we look at the first one, and here I've built on the work of Lisa Feldman Barrett, who wrote a wonderful book called The Secret Life of the Brain. Okay, so if I ask you to look at the following picture, in the middle, there's, for those of you who are as old as I am, in the middle there's Captain Koenig from Alpha 1999, and on the left there's a face and they show similar emotions. So if we compare Captain Koenig's face with the person on the left, it may look like what he is showing on his face is fear. Okay, if we compare him though with somebody who is showing surprise, we may also assume that he's showing surprise. So fear, surprise. Well, actually, it's neither. It could be, who knows? And the work of Lisa Feldman Barrett built on work of social anthropologists that went around the world, and they tried to identify the 5 big emotions, whether there was universality amongst people in the 5 big emotions. And really what they found in those days was that the emotion that was shared by everybody was happiness, and everybody would show that through a smile. Well, in Barrett's work, it turned out that actually the smile, the one thing that they did think was a universal emotion, that smile, was also not quite true. So the groups that had worked with, remote groups in the world that had worked with the social anthropologists eventually cottoned on to the fact that they, that the researchers were looking for something, okay, and I'm sure because they were sick and tired of all these strange people asking them funny questions, they imitated a smile, you know. So really, there's absolutely no universality in emotions. Nobody, you know, all of us are familiar probably with people indicating yes, you know, in terms of a head shake like this or like this, okay. There's nothing that if we look at people, that we can say, well, that is what that person is experiencing. There is just no such thing. So the second problem with you know, with emotions and our perception of emotions in others, is that we actually make our emotions. So once again, this comes from Lisa's work. So you know, so she tells a lovely story about going out with a guy that she didn't really think. She was in college and she didn't really think she was attracted to him, but he asked her out to dinner, and you know, she didn't have anything to do, and it was you know, she decided to go, and you know, maybe she was wrong. So she goes to dinner with him, and during dinner she experiences in her body the kind of typical fluttering of butterflies in her stomach, and you know, and feeling kind of slightly lightheaded, all feelings that she up to that stage had previously associated with being attracted to somebody. So you know, she thought, well, maybe I was wrong. Maybe I am attracted to this guy. So goes home, arrives back at her dorm room, and has a stomach flu that lasts for 3 days. So completely confused the somatic messages her body gave her with what she was experiencing in relation to this guy. So we can't even really trust our emotions, you know. So we do make our emotions, and becoming aware of it also, you know, gives us other benefits. But knowing that if we can't even identify it in ourselves because it's not pure, and how on earth can we identify emotions in others? Okay, so the third thing is, if we look at how we make sense or meaning of situations, it's worthwhile to you know, just to go through the process of what happens in our brains. So we start first of all by sensing, you know, so that's literally the 5 senses that we use. So you know, we can hear something, and if we work with in organizations, we often rely mostly on our eyes and our ears. What are people saying and what are we seeing? Okay, then we make sense, and that making sense is actually subject to where we are in our own development as you know, as leaders, as people, our own adult development. So for instance, if I am we're not talking about the action logics in detail here, but if I look at the work of Torbert, who was one of the people who defined the whole concept of action logic, if I look at my expert lens, which is one of the stages, if I look at my expert lens and I see 2 people disagreeing, I might make up that they are disagreeing because the one doesn't understand the solution. If I look at it through the achiever action logic lens, I might make up that they're disagreeing because they're not in agreement about how long the solution will take to implement, or maybe that there are too many outside dependencies to get the job done. Okay, if I look through my individualist lens, which is another action logic, I might make up that both of them are correct, but they're not even trying to solve the same problem, maybe, you know, or I might make up that they're simply not listening to one another. So depending on where I am in my own development, when I look at a group, I might see different things, and I might come to different conclusions. Okay, so once again, you know, risky. You know, in our sense making, meaning making, the next step would be responding. So once again, depending on where we are, depending on the situation, we may choose a response that nobody else would choose, you know, and that may be or may not be the most appropriate response. Okay, so inside groups, we generally bathed, in this action logic, and we can also help one another look at it through different action logic lenses. So, one brain can look at it at it one way. Many brains together look at it very differently. So, the second reason for impaired observation, or one of the second common reason for impaired observation, is something called confirmation bias. And I'd like to share another video clip with you. Just a very interesting clip that talks about what we want to see in situations, how that influences what we actually see. So if we think about inside our own families, we very often will see in those people that are close to us. I often see this at Christmas time. We often see in those people that are close to us, we see and hear only things that they do that confirms what we already believe about them. Okay, so if I know, for instance, that my brother is a miserable old naysayer, when he opens his mouth, there's always negativity streaming out, I believe, and I don't even listen to him to know that that's the truth. So we really first we believe and then we see. So let's have a look at this clip to to just see how photographers do this.
You're about to meet Michael. He lives fast as a self-made millionaire.
You didn't have to dress up. It's all right.
You're going to photograph Michael. He's actually saved somebody's life. Michael is an ex-inmate. He's a commercial fisherman. Michael claims to be psychic.
Nice to meet you.
Michael's a former alcoholic. Here's your camera. I would like you to flesh out the essence of who he is.
What would you like out of this? What would you like the photograph to say about you?
Do you find that being a psychic impacts much on your day-to-day life?
I can see this is emotional for you. Like to get to know the person.
You've only got 10 minutes, right?
I think you're a guy that's put yourself out there. You're not hiding anything. My plan was to find out about whoever it was and to try and get that. And what I learned from him is he's incredibly brave.
It was really intense. Pull this shirt out. Sorry.
I wanted to see the nature of the person, which then present a challenge. How do you portray him as a fisherman?
That's perfect.
He's a self-made millionaire and sort of a little bit intimidating. I wasn't going for a beautiful, nice, perfectly lit portrait.
I just want to try bring out something of who you are. I think that you just treat people like the everyday people, like everybody is.
Pleasure. Thank you so much.
I hope I've got that guy's bravery on film.
So it was a very intimidating environment.
So you work.
I like the empty chair next to it too.
Because this is a totally different person.
Yeah.
Almost looks like 6 different people. So not everything I told you today was true. I'm not a fisherman. I am not an alcoholic. The GFC hit me hard, but I've never been a millionaire. Never been in prison. I am a Bondi lifesaver, but the story we talked about never did happen. Not psychic. Can barely spell it.
Before I knew there were different characteristics, I thought, that's really strange. These don't look like portraits of the character I thought you were. You always got your own preconceptions and you've got your ideas.
It pushed me into a position and a space that I wouldn't normally be in.
You have to dig a lot deeper. It means you've got to be, I think you're a lot more creative to work out how you're going to play things.
So if we think about our confirmation bias, it becomes possible for us to see that we can project onto people exactly what's in our filters, what's in our preferences, what's in our history. So, once again, it's not a clean view when we look at people generally, and we go already into that sense making from sensing without their input. Okay, so the last reason kind of holds has a connection with the previous two and it's something that's really prevalent for us as problem solvers, and also in the current pace that we are living in, which I really hoped was going to be slowed down by COVID, and it seems to have sped up for a lot of us, unfortunately. So if we think about when we are leading or coaching, and there's a problem on the table, our natural inclination is to want to solve that problem. And if we think about how we look at problems in a lot of cases in organizations today, it's something to be dealt with and move on. And when we think about being reactive, because that's what if we deal with stuff and move on, we don't create capacity in ourselves and definitely not in others if we do not slow down and and really have a look at what's at play here, what's at play with the people involved, etc., before we move on. So the reason why this is so important for me in when I talk about Agile is that we have this subtle but profound change that we're trying to make in the Agile world. It's moving power from people that traditionally held power, people like organizational leaders, to people that are actually closer to the work. And it's a big adjustment for both of those parties. It's a big adjustment for those that are sharing their power, because things will go slower. And it's also a big adjustment for those that have to pick up new power, because they are not always confident about what they should be doing. So this is, when we look at observation as a whole, we jump to that acting part of observation, or that react part of the observation, within no time at all. And what we lose along the way is we lose the ability to see what people can bring to a solution that's novel. So especially if we think about leaders stepping in to to come up with solutions, rather than reflecting back to people what they see is going on, it loses the opportunity for unexperienced or inexperienced or younger people to come up with ways of looking at a problem that's not colored by confirmation bias through filters, etc. Okay, so that's the third reason that I've seen people not really observing but jumping to conclusions. So all in all, what we really need to start doing is, when we look at a situation, when we are the observer, we need to bear in mind that most of the time we don't really know what's going on. We can form an opinion, and we can certainly see things, especially if we're working with groups. We can see things that others might have difficulty in seeing. Okay, but we really need to be very careful about what we make up the problem is, the solution is, what people should do, etc. So what do we do then? So we need to start with our intent. What is it that we're trying to achieve in the situation? Are we teaching people skills? Because then we would reflect different. Are we trying to help them grow? Grow their thinking, developing them? Are we supporting them in solving their own problems? And the deeper the change that we want to bring about in people, the lighter our feedback needs to be. The less interpretation, the cleaner the observations. So if we think about how we would go about doing it, okay, the way that I like to think about it is if we can look at situations like a movie camera. You know, if we can simply, instead of going from, if somebody raises their voice, our, our natural instinct is to, based on what else we see in the situation, is that they are angry, or they are frustrated, or they are dominating the conversation. You know, there's a whole bunch of things that automatically, based on who we are, and where we come from and what we've experienced, that we bring. Okay, so if we really want to, if we really want to make sure that we are serving the person or the group that we are working with, we need to keep what we see as clean as possible, and keep our observations and keep our interpretations and our evaluations out of it. Okay, that means that we have to stay curious, which requires a lot of self-management. You know, if I'm seeing something happening, instead of making up about what's really happening, if I can reflect back what is actually, what I'm actually seeing, you'll be amazed at what people come up with. You'll be amazed. I mean, there's actually neuroscience that says if we stay in the space of sensing for as long as we can, the options that we generate in terms of what should happen next become, they grow and grow and grow and grow, slowing down, staying there, and simply looking at, what more can I see? What more did I hear? What else could be going on if I don't jump into the sense making part of it? Okay, so that requires from us, that requires great self-management. And even if we are right, I mean, because obviously sometimes we might be right with what's happening, we may find that our picture of what's happening, if we jump into that problem solving space, our picture of what's happening may be missing some details. Okay, so what can we focus on? So if we look at groups of people, a lot of the information comes through the conversations people have. So you can look at, if you look at how they are speaking, so those of you who are familiar with structured dynamics, there's a wealth of information in that body of work. But even if you just start with, are people using I statements? Are people using we statements? It statements? We you statements? Are they mostly phrasing it in questions, or are they making statements the whole time? That tells you. That tells the group something, and generally just sharing that observation with a group will make them reflect on what's going on. You don't have to do the interpretation for them. Okay, we can look at, how do people respond to one another? Okay, so are there people that are getting ignored? Are there people that are just being jumped over in terms of responses? Are people bullying? Is there mollifying? Do people, is there a thread of conversation? Do people constantly come up in debate, or do they support one another in their conversations? Okay, once again, reflect that back. I'm noticing that we've had a lot of ideas on the table, but we seem to jump from idea to idea without going into any idea into more detail. That's a neutral, morally neutral way of stating an observation. Then we can look at what the roles are that people take on. Who initiates new topics, who facilitates, who mediates, who interrupts whom, when and how often, who sets the schedule, who controls the pace. So those kind of inner roles that sometimes are tied to organizational roles, but the inner roles that people take on. We can also look at the physical positioning of a group when they get together. So how are people sitting? Do they change positions? You know, what's their relationship to the furniture and the tools? Do they, you know, do they sit all over the chairs? Do they sit on the tables? What's the shape of the group when they sit down? You know, the relative proximity. Do they, you know, do they sit? People, when they form community, they tend to sit with their knees not further than 9 inches apart. Okay. And, you know, are people all talking at once? Is there a high level of energy in the room? That would be an interpretation. But are people talking at once? Are they waiting? Are there long silences? All of those things, you know. So then, you know, there's many things that we can focus on, but the last one I want to focus on today is just look for the non-verbal clues as well. So where do people look when they talk, you know, when they listen? What do they do with their hands? What's their posture like? What happens to the expressions on their faces? What about the tone of voice? You know, is it threatening? Is it low? Is it what, you know, what do you make of that? What's the volume? Is there lots of laughter? Is there diversity in the group? You know, are there cultural differences? Because one thing that I haven't mentioned is, of course, when we interpret what's going on for a group, we can really run ourselves slab bang into cultural differences in specific groups. And over time, you know, people get to know one another. So individual differences, culture differences, all of those things, they may get used to it. And then it's really useful if somebody from the outside can come in and just hold up a mirror. So if we practice observation and we give them the data, we give the person in front of us or the group in front of us, just give them the data about what we sense. And generally what we sense with our 5 senses. And if we sense something else, then we need to qualify that it is something that we are sensing and we therefore could be really wrong. I believe that that's the biggest gift that we can give to group, give a group, you know, or another person. It's something that they cannot see themselves. And, you know, as a payback for that as well, as we observe our own observing, what we will notice is we will notice where our preferences come in, where our filters come in, you know, where our prejudices come in, our rank, our privilege. So there's a huge amount of information that observing in a morally neutral way can give you, not only about the people that you are interacting with, but also about where you are with your own development and what you can do to develop yourself. So that's it.
Perfect. I really love your videos. They were so fascinating. I still keep thinking about this. But I have a question for you for the start, right? So think about your past experience working with organizations, or maybe your personal life, whatever you are willing to share with us, right?
Yeah.
And I would be interested about some story, like where this impaired observation played a role and how it went, and maybe what you did to show them or something, which would be like tangible story from real world.
Yeah. So the first one that comes to mind is a few years ago, I was working with a very male-dominated group of developers. I think that they were about of the 15 people, and there was 1 female. At that point, when I started working with them, the group had already assumed a very sort of male character, and the 1 female that was in the group, in order to be accepted and in order to, you know, be heard, she adopted a lot of the male mannerisms, you know. So a lot of the mannerisms, for instance, were you know, slapping one another on. There was quite a lot of sort of slightly rough physical contact between people, and you know, and she adopted the same. So so I noticed in meetings when the group got together to do work together as well, the same kind of what was showing in their physical acts towards one another was showing up in the way they would speak to one another as well. And there was a little bit of kind of rough play to get to solutions, you know. And when I knew them well enough to raise this with him, because also in this particular group, you know, anybody that came with anything that was not, that was kind of touchy-feely, you know, I used to call it the F word for them, you know, feelings, was kind of booed and you know, what are you coming with, these kind of things. So I had to work with him for quite a while before I could actually say, you guys realize that that I see you a lot, you know, sort of slapping one another quite hard when you are, you know, when you're talking with one another, you know, and that it feels to me that kind of physical slapping behavior also come into your meeting. Am I seeing that, you know, is that my imagination, or am I picking up on something here, you know? And what that did was, so there was kind of a silence first of all when I mentioned it, and then you know, one of the men actually spoke up and said, actually, yeah, that's true. And it opened up a conversation, you know, through which I could also bring up the fact that, you know, I could ask them, so what are you noticing about the impact that it has on the female, you know, because she wasn't a junior person, she was an architect, you know, what do you make up about that? So what it did was it created a conversation that that allowed everybody to speak up, and for half the group, more than half the group, about 2/3 of the group said that they actually didn't enjoy it, you know, but they felt that that was what you had to do in that particular group to stay on top. And ultimately what it led to was you know, a change in both the behavior of the group, and it led to much more collaborative decision makings around solutions, where they realized, well, actually some of the junior guys, there was one particular junior guy that had been kind of hanging back, that actually most of the time could bring a lot more to the solutions that they were coming up than any one of the more senior guys. So, you know, so that was it was in my early days of coaching. That's why I remember it, because the urge in those days for me, much more so, it's still there, but much more so than today, was to simply say, hey, you know, you guys realize that you are bullying, you know, or very close to bullying the rest of your team, you know. And I probably would have just been met with derision and denial if I did that. Whereas just sharing that observation really brought about a change in the group. So,
thank you for that story. And I have a question from Jan here. He is asking, pretty much stating first that the biggest challenge he has seen in keeping observation out of evaluation part. So do you have any thoughts about this?
Yeah. So 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 first of all, Jan, it's normal to do that. You know, our brains work in a way that we have to jump to a conclusion, to action immediately, and it comes from, you know, from our forefathers who did have to make a decision quite quickly about where to, you know, what to do, where to go, etc. It's just inappropriate at this point. So start noticing when you are speaking something, when you're trying to observe, that does not pertain to what you can state objectively, you know. So that whole idea of a movie camera really helps me. So if I was a movie camera and I looked at the situation, what would I have heard? So you know, can I repeat exactly what I've heard, or can I describe exactly what I've seen before I do anything else? and really practice. So think about it. If you look at a situation, think about, okay, what did I see? What did I hear? What did I feel? And if there were smells and tastes, that would be great too. But most of the time, it's our seeing and our hearing. So you can work with somebody else as well that can help you just prompt, and bring you back to the sensing, bring you back to the sensing, bring you back to the sensing the whole time, so that you become adept at realizing, okay, this is when I'm sensing, and I'm already making up stuff about it. Would be that would be a good way. One thing that you can practice is you can practice doing exactly what I did with you today, is watch something on YouTube or watch something on television and just write down, what are you observing? And once you've written it down, go and have a look and see which of these were actual observations and which of these were already interpretations. So
that's a good test. I need to try it. Then I'm afraid what to see. Now, Chris is asking, how do you balance the clean observations and being curious against those who are reaching out because they genuinely need advice or mentoring? Are these diametrically opposed?
So, so I suppose 99% of people who come to me as a coach actually want me to tell them the answer. Okay, so so they request that advice or consulting. Okay, so and hang on, I just want to change my screen share. No, I can't do it quickly. Techno peasant. So 99% of people actually want that advice. Know that when you give them that advice, generally it's because you want to be able to support or help them. And know that in a lot of cases, you will be giving them more help when you give them the observations and ask them, and in the beginning, people are lazy because they're not used to this. We're building a muscle that people are not, so we are so used to, if we look at groups, especially those of you who are facilitators and who are trainers as well. As a facilitator, we very often, if we notice that something is going on in the group, we will throw in something to tweak what's going on. So if we notice, for instance, that the energy in the group is low, we will quickly change the frame so that people do something that's slightly more energizing. You need to, if you really want to support them, you need to stop doing that. And you need to, instead of adjusting that energy, for instance, in the room, share with them what you've picked up. So I'm noticing that the energy in the room is dropping. What's up? I'm noticing that the energy in the room is dropping. Is it just me? What's up? So it's the same. It's related to what Jan is asking, has asked as well. We need to become aware of those different stages in our observation that we jump through like this and stop at the first point. And even if we have already made an evaluation of it, okay, or an interpretation of it, we could share that interpretation, but we hold it very lightly. And we know that when we share that kind of interpretation with people, it will anchor something for them, so it will, if you've given them the answer, they're going to stop thinking about it. And ultimately, over the long term, you're going to have to keep on giving the answers. If you keep on, if you give answers, you want to make sure. I always think that a coach's job is to make themselves as obsolete as quickly as possible when they, when they come into a situation. So you need to make sure that you don't do their work for them. And the best way to do it is give it straight back to them. By saying, this is what I'm noticing, or this is what I'm hearing, or, this is the pattern that I'm seeing, in a morally neutral way. What do you make of it, or am I wrong? So simply offering, in coaching, we call it revealing the system to itself. giving people new information about what's going on in their system. So
it reminded me the ORSC class when we've been practicing this revealing the system to itself, and I still remember how awkward it felt at first. But I know with a bit of practice, you tend to do it, right?
Yeah. There's also something when you start doing it that that you may feel stupid, you know. So so if I'm not drawing the conclusion, people are going to think that I'm stupid. You know, I mean, I can see what's going on here because we really reward that behavior. We reward the behavior of looking at a situation, forming an opinion about it, and coming up with a solution. So it really, you know, it's an ego, letting go of the ego as well, you know, which we need to do if we want to become real good leaders and coaches. So, you know, so you have to become used to it, you know. And I mean, I'll never forget, one of my ORSC teachers told me, ORSC is the coaching school that I studied with. One of them told me that they once spent a week just practicing how to observe. So if you think this is a big topic and you think this is a hard topic, you're right. You know, experienced coaches spending a whole week doing nothing other but just saying what they are seeing in the system that's in front of them. You know, it is not an easy thing to do. It's one of those, you know, it's like writing good user stories, or like Agile in general. It's simple, but it's not easy. So,
that's right. That's right. Well, I can relate to that. Aneta is asking, what are the challenges when you are observing people you know for a while versus those you meet for the first time?
Yeah. So there's a great metaphor about being pickled. You know, so the longer we are in a system, the longer we work with a group of people, the more we will start forming opinions about them, and the more, you know, our brains do that too. Our brains like to really be efficient. So if I know that you tend to be negative, you know, like I told you about my brother, I don't have a brother, by the way. So so if I know that you're negative, I'm going to see that, you know, I'm going to first, when you say something, I'm first going to jump to he's being negative rather than really listening to what's going on. So the same thing happens for us when we work with groups of people. We get pickled, you know, in a jar of pickles. When you put a little gherkin in there, the gherkin doesn't turn the rest of the jar of pickles, you know, to not be salty and vinegary. The pickle that you add, or the cucumber that you add, becomes pickled with the rest. So we also need to watch ourselves, you know, which requires great self-management. We really need to watch ourselves when we work with groups of people with groups of pickles for a long time. That, you know, that we don't start seeing them through a lens that's quite fixed. Okay, so I know when I start getting grumpy about the group of people that I work with, you know, the system that I work with. I mean, I love the people that I work with generally. When I start getting grumpy and, you know, and then I know it's time for me to move on, you know, or it's time for me, if it's not a system that I could move on from. I mean, there's some systems that we would, at points in time, love to move on from, but we can't. Then I need to sit down and really kind of clean myself of the prejudices that I've developed against the people that I'm working with. So for people who are internal to organizations, that generally means having the tough conversations, you know, and really maybe recontracting around how we are with one another and what we do when things go wrong, etc., etc. So.
Perfect. I have a last question for you, and that's a very simple one. What do you want people to remember from today?
Don't believe yourself.
That's a good one. I like it. Thank you very much. And now we have a break, so enjoy the break, stretch a little bit, have some coffee, and we start soon after.